and today he is not in his fatigues. So I almost didn't recognize him. So let's welcome Jason.
So there's a saying I always tell my wife. She always asks me how flying is and how challenging it is, and she's completely in awe of me, which is kind of cool because she's my wife. There's a saying that I always tell her, and I kind of tell my passengers when they get freaked out about flying on an airplane. I tell them, I say, takeoffs are optional, landings are mandatory. So there I am in my Air Force twin-engine jet T1, flying with a student pilot, me the Air Force instructor pilot, and the objective of that student's flight for the day is to land the plane and land it halfway decent. So we're coming down final, and everything is looking halfway decent, and all of a sudden, boom! It's like a carrier landing. You know, you've been on the flights where the guy just lands it and you're thinking, oh my God, what just happened? Is that a Navy guy up front? And all of a sudden the plane just starts jostling side to side. You start feeling your insides rotating. You're thinking, please stop this train wreck right now. Well, that was the flight with this student. So that goes on a couple more times, and finally I take the jet from the student, climb the jet to a safe altitude above the ground, and I look over at the student and I go, hey, do you understand exactly how to land an airplane? Do you understand exactly what aim point and airspeed are? She kind of looks over at me and goes, nope. Got it. So at that point I realized I need to teach the student about aim point and airspeed. Well, allow me to tell you a little bit about aim point and airspeed and how do you make the perfect landing. In every landing, there's 3 phases to it. There's the long final phase where you're probably about 900 feet and you're about a mile out. And then there's the close-in phase where you're in what we call terminal phase, and you're right there by the runway. You're roughly about 100, 150 feet above the ground. And then there's the actual part where you actually go to land the plane. And so in doing that, everything we plan for in an airplane and teaching how to make the perfect landing is about the aim point and the airspeed. So if I have the aim point right, which might be the runway numbers or the 1,000-foot down marker, and I have the airspeed shacked, and my Boeing 767 with American Airlines, I'm looking at roughly 135 to 145 knots. So I'm lining it up, I see exactly where I want to land at, and I put that speed and I shack that speed. And if I do that and I keep that aim point in the same place the whole way down, I'm going to have probably the perfect landing, assuming I do the transition properly. Now, why do I tell you all about aim point and airspeed? Because aim point and airspeed is important in your life. Some of you all have some aim points out there that you're shooting for. It might be the goal of being a supervisor. It might be being a CEO. It might be being the best hostmaster. It might be being the best parent that you could be. Who knows? Every person in this room has an aim point that they're shooting for. Well, when you're shooting for that aim point, now you got to add some airspeed to it. Now, what is that airspeed? That airspeed is your motivation, your inspiration. What are you doing to get there? A lot of us, we forget that we need to add some airspeed to that aim point. There's a lot of people that you all have known and that you all have heard speaking or speak to you over time, and they say, well, I want to do this. I want to do that. And they're telling you what these aim points that they're thinking about, but they're never putting any airspeed behind it. They're never taking the throttles, pushing them forward, and engaging those huge turbofans of life, those huge turbofan engines of life, and at times called their brain, to engage, to put behind that aim point. So there I am back in that Air Force jet with that student pilot, and I'm trying to explain to him about aim point and airspeed. I say, look, here's the deal. I see you got these 2 things, your aim point and your airspeed. Figure out what your aim point is and never let it change. Doesn't matter. So then I said, okay, now that you got the aim point checked, you know exactly where you're aiming for, now let's work on the airspeed. With that airspeed, if I change the airspeed, then I've got to make sure I do something with the airplane to change the aim point. So in an aircraft, in a jet, you got your throttles and then you got your yoke. If I pull the throttles back, then I'm probably going to have to change that yoke. If I push them forward, the jet is going to rise, the nose is going to take off and start rising. I'm going to have to push it over. And so as I'm talking to the student, it all of a sudden clicks to me that I missed a key ingredient to help him succeed at making the perfect landing. That key ingredient is what we call trim. Trim is similar to, like, it's not the autopilot exactly. It's almost kind of like a cruise control. What the trim tab in an airplane does is this really little small finite piece of metal on the back of the aircraft surface. The rudder tab might be as big as this little makeshift wall, and you got this one little piece. And so as the jet gets faster and as more airflow goes over the wings, the nose starts wanting to rise, and it starts wanting to come out of equilibrium. So you use the trim tab, and what you do is you end up pushing the nose down. So as the airplane gets faster and faster, you trim and trim and trim, the nose actually goes down, and now you can actually take your hands off the controls and you're in perfect equilibrium. So I figured out how to tell the student how to make the perfect landing. So for you all in this room, how do you make the perfect landing in life? I told you about your aim points. It's some goal and some objective. I told you about your airspeed. It's your motivation and your inspiration. What is your trim? How do you find equilibrium in your life? It might be that significant other. It might be that loved one. It might be your children. It might be your job. It might be the outdoor activities that you enjoy. But there is something that you need to find in your life that is the trim that brings you equilibrium and puts you in a place where you can have that solid aim point and airspeed, and everything is in place and you can remove your hands from the controls and the airplane does not go crazy. So find that equilibrium in your life, find that trim, use that trim button to trim your life up and find some equilibrium. So a few things I'll leave you with. Never forget that takeoffs are optional, landings are mandatory. And the other thing I'd like to tell people is no matter what you're going through, somebody wishes their life sucked as good as yours. Blue skies, fair winds, all the best.